I've got Larry Wheels and John Gaglione with me this morning. We're recording on a Sunday, and right after the time change, so nobody's body knows what time it is right now. That's clear. That's clear. How you guys doing today?
I'm doing all right. I'm still in Russia. I fly back. I start my journey back home tomorrow with a stop in Istanbul for a day and then finally from Istanbul to LAX.
Wow, I had no idea you were in Russia. That's great.
All
There's
the
some,
different time zones.
Yeah,
yeah,
like
no kidding.
what time is it there? It's 10 o'clock on the Pacific Daylight Time now. What time is it there?
It's 9 p.m. here.
9 p.m. Oh my goodness. Yeah, and John is in what you're in the Eastern Daylight Zone at the
Yeah,
moment.
so that's one. Even since moving, I still never got out of that time zone. So stuck in the same time zone. But yeah, like we had like I said, a late night as well. But it'll be good energy. It's good to have it's kind of funny. I think like part of when we all first got together, it was kind of I think a big breaking point for like all of us in our kind of powerlifting careers, if you will, if that's
Yeah,
such a thing. So it's just cool to get everyone kind of back together and hop on and catch up.
yeah, for sure. It was. We were talking about it. I mean, you guys were on the old podcast like in 2016 ish. So I think it was like maybe before Larry's uh, world record. Maybe I think.
I think so. I've kind of for people that are watching the video after the fact, I'm wearing his shirt. So I think the first time after the 242 record was I think when we kind of all got together. I think, or it might have been. Well, so I don't know if we talked about this the last time or not. So Larry had the world record for like about zero point 0.2 seconds, and then Andrew Herbert and then they both ended up missing their last deadlift. So Andrew Herbert had it for
Right. Yeah.
8 weeks or so, and then we kind of went back to the record breakers meet at Combat Sports Academy, and then Larry retook it back and kind of upped it by like a big margin, and kind of that record stood for quite a while.
Yeah.
And like I said, if not for some accidents at the current U.S. Open, it would have been set even higher. Like I said, we could all like talk a little smack and whatever, but Larry was on pace to kind of up it more, and then we kind of decided he kind of outgrew the 242s. But yeah, that was kind of the first of many runs at many world records. It was a good like a good 5 year like kind of run at like world records in different weight classes, and
Mm.
that was kind of like the start of his kind of powerlifting reign, if you will. So
Yeah, it was a different time in lifting for sure. I mean, I think that we discussed the last time that uh, people lifted more in crews, like you had people around you, even if you were at a certain point, even if you were a raw lifter, being lifting in gear pretty much required having people around you because you had to get in and out of the stuff. I mean, um, it was challenging. You didn't have the help and you didn't have the spotters, and you were handling weights that you would handle raw. It was a whole thing. It was just that flavor of the sport demanded having people around you for the most part. And it was a different time. I don't know. Now it's hard to put together a crew. I see, and like I own a gym, and I see people lifting, but they come in like when they have time, and not okay. Well, I'm meeting so and so and so and so and so and so, and we're gonna lift together on the same bar. We're gonna change plates in between. We're gonna do all that stuff. And now it's like it's a little bit of a lone ranger situation for most of them.
yeah, Larry, do you have any like memories of when we kind of first started training together at in Farmingdale? I know even our first like workout together, there was like multiple 700-pound deadlifters in the room, which was so. What was that kind of like for you at just being 19? Because I'm sure you, even as strong as you were, you probably never seen or trained with guys like that in that type of environment. So what was that like for you, just kind of starting out, kind of a young man, and just trying to find his way?
Sure. So it was a mutual friend of ours, Kevin Oak, that introduced me to John. We went out there for a deadlift party, and I was spoiled at that time because I always had a workout partner since my first day in the gym. I always had a strong support from the community. Everyone, wherever I was training, was very keen on helping me out and wanted me to succeed. And oddly enough, now at 30, having my own gym, I've never went longer and did more training sessions alone in my life. And it's definitely been a compromise to my training and my ambition. And it's something that I took for granted at that time, something I thought was just normal. And I didn't
Mhm.
realize how special the community I had was. And now I'm more fired up than ever to bring that back.
Yeah, I can understand that. Like now, I work out alone because I'm not doing anything that anybody's going to be interested in. I'm not trying to power lift. I'm not doing competition lifts for the most part, you know. So I can handle it, and I got, you know, I'm managing my time or whatever. But I do miss those days, and especially I miss sort of the challenge, you know, of not necessarily keeping up with people, but like keeping your just the same distance, I guess, between myself and somebody else, and maybe just like inching up on a little. I was so much older and just not at all a competitive lifter before I started. I mean, I was over 40 when I started lifting, and I don't necessarily recommend people waiting that long. But I mean, you were young when you got into this whole sport. Like, what question I have? We were I think we talked about this last time, John. That like it is difficult for a young person to sustain a career in powerlifting, or I mean, a lot of sports, but it's difficult for someone who has early success
Hmm.
to keep going because the improvements become like incremental over time, and the injuries mount, you know, for sure, because if you're pushing it like hard all the way. If you could tell yourself something about those conditions when you first started, if you could like speak to younger Larry, like what would you tell him?
I would tell younger Larry what I tell everybody that asks me for advice at expos or at the gym or in passing, to just stick to the program. The only time I ever got injured or didn't peak properly was when I went off program for
Mm.
attention because the crew was hyping me up because I was impulsive. Powerlifting is a game of restraint. It takes immense amount of self-control. When you walk in the gym, you feel like Superman, everything feels extra light, and you have to tell yourself, no, I can't push my limits today. And pushing the limits is the fun part. And
Yeah.
I believe that's why many people love bodybuilding, because you can go into a bodybuilding workout, do sets of 10, 20, 30 to failure, and really push your limit every workout, still get progress. But if you do that in powerlifting, your CNS won't recover, your training will be compromised, right? Like you have to stick to the program and hold yourself back when you don't want to. And I've struggled with that since day one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can remember a time, but I'm curious, Larry, what if you could pinpoint it? But like there was definitely like the early days where maybe listening was not really happening, and I know you bombed out of a few meets, but then when you got that invite to Boss of Bosses, I feel like a switch kind of flipped, and then so I don't know if that was the kind of the defining moment, but can you remember like when did you decide, okay, like maybe I should, start like kind of being a little bit more compliant and communicating a little bit better, maybe listening to coach. What was that kind of like? And then was there any kind of moment that you can kind of remember where you're like, okay, let me give this a shot, and then kind of see what happens?
Well, bombing out of those meets is what really sparked that fire for me to take this more seriously and understand the importance of good communication with you, John, and how just a strong disgust for that feeling of, damn, I didn't even get to finish the meet. And I spent so many weeks or whatever it was, months preparing for this day, and I couldn't even finish. So there's no worse feeling for a powerlifter than that, right? Bombing out, not even making it to the end. And I never wanted to feel that way again.
All right. Looks like we're running here. Welcome. I've got Larry Wheels and John Gaglione with me this morning. We're recording on a Sunday, and right after the time change, so nobody's body knows what time it is right now. That's clear. That's clear. How you guys doing today?
I'm doing all right. I'm still in Russia. I fly back. I start my journey back home tomorrow with a stop in Istanbul for a day and then finally from Istanbul to LAX.
Wow, I had no idea you were in Russia. That's great.
There's
All the
some,
different time zones.
Yeah.
yeah,
Like
no kidding.
like what time is it there? It's 10 o'clock on the Pacific Daylight Time now. What time is it there?
It's 9 p.m. here.
9 p.m. Oh my goodness. Yeah. And John is in what, you're in the Eastern Daylight Zone at the
Yeah, so
moment.
that's one. Even since moving, I still never got out of that time zone. Stuck in the same time zone, but yeah, like we had a, like I said, a late night as well. But it'll be good energy. It's good to have, like, it's kind of funny. I think like part of when we all first got together, it was kind of, I think, a big breaking point for like all of us in our kind of powerlifting careers, if you will, if that's such a
Yeah.
thing. So it's just cool to, like, get everyone kind of back together and hop on and catch up.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. It was we were talking about it. I mean, you guys were on the old podcast like in 2016-ish. So I think it was like maybe before Larry's uh world record, maybe, I
I
think.
think so. I've kind of, for people that are watching the video after the, I'm wearing his shirt. So I think the first time after the 242 record was, I think, when we kind of all got together. I think, or it might have been. Well, so I don't know if we talked about this the last time or not. So Larry had the world record for like about zero point 0.2 seconds, and then Andrew Herbert, like, and then they both ended up missing their last deadlift. So Andrew Herbert had it for
Right, yeah.
8 weeks or so, and then we kind of went back to the record breakers meet at Combat Sports Academy, and then we, Larry retook it back and kind of upped it by like a big margin, and kind of that record stood for quite a while. And like I said, if not for some accidents at the current U.S. Open, it would have been, set even higher. Like I said, we could all like talk a little smack and whatever. But Larry was on pace to kind of up it more, and then we kind of decided he kind of outgrew the 242s. But yeah, that was kind of the first of many runs at many world records. It was a good like a good 5 year like kind of run at like world records in different weight classes, and that was kind of like the start of his kind of powerlifting reign, if you will.
Yeah, yeah, it was a different time in lifting for sure. I mean, I think that we discussed the last time that uh, people lifted more in crews, like you had people around you, even if you were at a certain point, even if you were a raw lifter, lifting in gear pretty much required having people around you because you had to get in and out of the stuff. I mean, um, it was challenging. You didn't have the help and you didn't have the spotters, and you were handling weights that you would handle raw. It was a whole thing. It was just that flavor of the sport demanded having people around you for the most part. And it was a different time. I don't know. Now it's hard to put together a crew. I see, like, I own a gym and I see people lifting, but they come in like when they have time and not okay, well, I'm meeting so and so and so and so and so and so, and we're gonna lift together on the same bar. We're gonna change plates in between. We're gonna do all that stuff. And now it's like it's a little bit of a Lone Ranger situation for most of them.
Yeah, Larry, do you have any like memories of when we kind of first started training together at in Farmingdale? I know even our first like workout together, there was like multiple 700-pound deadlifters in the room, which was so. What was that kind of like for you at just being 19 years? Because I'm sure you, even as strong as you were, you probably never seen or trained with guys like that in that type of environment. So what was that like for you, just kind of starting out, kind of a young man, and just trying to find his way?
Sure. So it was a mutual friend of ours, Kevin Oak, that introduced me to John. We went out there for a deadlift party, and I was spoiled at that time because I always had a workout partner since my first day in the gym. I always had a strong support from the community. Everyone, wherever I was training, was very keen on helping me out and wanted me to succeed. And oddly enough, now at 30, having my own gym, I've never went longer and did more training sessions alone in my life. And it's definitely been a compromise to my training and my ambition. It's something that I took for granted at that time, something I thought was just normal, and I didn't realize how special the community I had was. And now I'm more fired up than ever to bring that back.
Yeah, I can understand that. Like now I work out alone because I'm not doing anything that anybody's going to be interested in. I'm not trying to power lift. I'm not doing competition lifts for the most part, you know. So I can handle it, and I got, you know, I'm managing my time or whatever, but I do miss those days. And especially I miss sort of the challenge, you know, of not necessarily keeping up with people, but like keeping your just the same distance, I guess, between myself and somebody else, and maybe just like inching up on a little. I was so much older and just not not at all a competitive lifter before I started. I mean, I was over 40 when I started lifting, and I don't necessarily recommend people waiting that long. But I mean, you were young when you got into this whole sport. Like, what question I have, we were, I think we talked about this last time, John, that like it is difficult for a young person to sustain a career in powerlifting, or I mean, a lot of sports, but it's difficult for someone who has early success
Mm-hmm.
to keep going, because the improvements become like incremental over time, and the injuries mount, you know, for sure, because if you're pushing it like hard all the way. If you could tell yourself something about those conditions when you first started, if you could like speak to younger Larry, like what would you tell him?
I tell younger Larry what I tell everybody that asks me for advice at expos or at the gym or in passing, to just stick to the program. The only time I ever got injured or didn't peak properly was when I went off program for attention because the crew was hyping me up, because I was impulsive. Powerlifting is a game of restraint. It takes immense amount of self-control. When you walk in the gym, you feel like Superman, everything feels extra light, and you have to tell yourself, no, I can't push my limits today. And pushing the limits is the fun part. And I believe that's why many people love bodybuilding, because you can go into a bodybuilding workout, do sets of 10, 20, 30 to failure, and really push your limit every workout, still get progress. But if you do that in powerlifting, your CNS won't recover, your training will be compromised, right? Like you have to stick to the program and hold yourself back when you don't want to. And I've struggled with that since day one.
Yeah, I can remember a time, but I'm curious, Larry, what if you could pinpoint it? But like there was definitely like the early days where maybe listening was not really happening, and I know you bombed out of a few meets, but then when you got that invite to Boss of Bosses, I feel like a switch kind of flipped, and then so I don't know if that was the kind of the defining moment, but can you remember like when you decide, okay, like maybe I should, you know, start like kind of you know, being a little bit more compliant and communicating a little bit better, maybe, you know, listening to coach. You know, what was that kind of like? And then was there any kind of moment that you can kind of remember where you're like, okay, let me give this a shot, and then, you know, kind of see what happens?
Well, bombing out of those meets is what really sparked that fire for me to take this more seriously and understand the importance of good communication with you, John, and how just a strong disgust for that feeling of I didn't even get to finish the meet. And I spent so many weeks or whatever it was, months preparing for this day, and I couldn't even finish, you know. So there's no worse feeling for a powerlifter than that, right? Bombing out, not even making it to the end. And I never wanted to feel that way again.
Yeah, having bombed in a few meets myself, usually on the squat, always geared, just not, and depth, always on depth, you know, just like you just can't get down to a certain point. And I think that you know, part of that was, you know, the weight that you needed to gain to be competitive in the equipment, and then the way you had to cut to make weight for the meet, and then what, you know, when it comes back on, where does it go, right? And so your stuff fits differently, and you can't get down. But I feel like you were an extension of a time where like Stan Efferding, you know, kind of took the stage in 2009ish, 2010, and was very strong, obviously, but was also, you know, had aesthetics to his physique. He was, you know, Dan Green, another one who always, you know, looked more like a bodybuilder than a powerlifter, than a traditional powerlifter at that time. What did you always have like a dual drive about how you looked at and how how strong you were, or what was it? Was it one and then the other, or?
Yeah, I always wanted to maintain some level of a bodybuilder aesthetic, as I knew that's what would make me stand out from all the other powerlifters, and that's how I can make a stake for myself in the sport. Besides taking world records, and I understood that to try and make a business out of it, it would be easier, if I looked the part. If I had abs and I was able to
Mhm.
lift the weight I was lifting, it would be easier to stand out. So when I was actively competing, although I did frequently have cheat meals and slip up on my diet, it was pretty clean. I was having chicken, beef, fish with lots of rice, and that was my diet for a long time, especially when I turned on that switch and said, okay, now it's time to lock in and get ready for competition. All those bad habits usually went away. It's only when I was in the off season and I'm not actively preparing for a goal
Mhm.
did I just have no motivation to eat clean, to train hard, to be smart, and bad habits get the best of me. But when it's time to prepare for competition, that switch is on and I'm dialed in.
I'm amazed at our gym has kind of a majority of younger, sort of 20s, 30s USAPL or Powerlifting America lifters, and because they don't have the luxury of 24-hour weigh-ins and all, their weight is pretty consistent all the time, and they all look jacked. They don't necessarily look like bodybuilders, but they all look fit. They all have abs. It's disgusting, really. Is what it is. It's like, how are you? And then you remember that they were young and that they never really put on those extra pounds. And we have one competitor who dropped a weight class in the last year or so, and he didn't look bad before, and now he's just shredded all the time. And some of them start to get like, oh, maybe I could compete in bodybuilding, and then that's a totally different experience for them. It's not, they're not chasing numbers the same way that they're chasing what happens in the mirror. So yeah, it's an interesting contrast to when I started 20 years ago.
I think you mentioned Stan. I think he was definitely instrumental in both of our kind of learnings of nutrition, especially obviously vertical diet got really popular, used by a lot of strength athletes, and we definitely took notes, learned a lot from him. And what's really interesting as well, um, obviously Eric Lillibridge is really famous. His that was the 308 record that Larry broke, but some people may not know the 242 record that was broken was originally obviously Andrew Herbert. He's been doing some bodybuilding as well. But the original record was John Rivas, and John Rivas actually just turned pro as well. He's out in Virginia now, so we actually got to. So it's just kind of funny to seeing all these guys come full circle. So there definitely is like a little bit more crossover that I think we're seeing with some of these like high level power lifters sometimes either transitioning over full time or kind of dabbling a little bit in both. And obviously Stan was like the most famous example. And I think before then, we got our information like we had the Oreo challenge, the
From
um,
Dave Tate.
Dave Tate's Oreo challenge, and
Yeah.
then like J.M. Blakely, like put olive oil on pizza, and that those have add MSG to your Chinese food, or even more so you get hungry again. I mean, that was kind of like the knowledge that we kind of, and like kind of the older generation of the geared lifters just get as bloated. I had a training partner. My first bencher was a guy, Chris Taylor. And he taught me, along with Vinny DeCenzo, taught me how to bench in a shirt. And Chris Taylor he would drink like a liter of like Coca Cola, so that he would have the bench belly, and that was like his trick. And I remember, and he was a big. I think I don't know if he ever did. I don't think he ever did in competition, but I saw him like do like 900 to like a one board, which is in like one of those Phenom shirts, and like that was his like he drank the soda and he got this big belly, so he didn't have to bring it down as far, and that was so the nutrition aspect definitely changed a lot like over the years for sure.
Yeah, there's I mean, whether or not everything that everyone is doing for health and wellness at this point is actually like legitimate or scientific or whatever, there's a lot of people who are really trying to concentrate on it in their own way, and there's still a lot of like bro science, like you're talking about.
Yeah.
the Oreo challenge. I remember that. I never did that. I mean, I like Oreos, but I couldn't eat that many Oreos. I mean, I can demolish a sleeve and then I'm done. I'm done with Oreos.
But Jim, what was your diet like when you're actively competing?
When I was actively competing, like when I started powerlifting, I had never weighed more than 185 pounds, and I started going over to a gym in the Bay Area. I live in Sacramento, so it was about an hour or so away, one way, and it was called Diablo Barbell, and I was like suggested I should just eat a lot more than what I was eating, and so it was just whatever. Really, it was like a lot of meat, a lot of protein, like a lot of barbecue places where you got the platter that was like this big and just full of 5 different kinds of meats and sausages and cheese. That was in pretty sharp contrast to what I've been doing before. Like I gained about 15 pounds clean in my late 30s. Like that was sort of my lowest body fat. And I was just not eating any of that stuff. I just wasn't at all. And I'm kind of back there now. I don't eat a lot of beef and stuff. I still eat a lot of chicken and all, I mean, it doesn't look like a bodybuilder diet, but it doesn't look like an old powerlifter diet either. Back then though, it was the issue of like, trying to gain weight. And I think my biggest squat was like 650, and that was at 214. Like I couldn't fill out the 220s at that point. It was just kind of a struggle to get there, honestly. And then, at some point I also didn't fill out the 242s. I just couldn't, 220 was too hard. But 242 was, a light 242, I guess. Excuse me. We were talking about crews, and John intimated that you're looking to try to get a crew together at some point here around your gym in Southern California.
Absolutely. And over the years, I've had various people attempt to train with me, and unfortunately, many of them get discouraged because they think, well, I can't keep up with you, you're too strong. And I think a lot of the time they're missing the point. I need somebody that wants to push themselves as much as I do, and we're working towards the same goal. We're trying to get stronger and better, because it's inspiring and motivating for me to watch somebody push themselves. I don't care how much they're lifting. I just want to see them try and be a better version of themselves and be willing to put in the work, and that's what inspires me and gets me fired up. If they're as strong as me or even stronger, that's a bonus, but it's not what I'm looking for to make it work. So to surround myself with a community of powerlifters or just people that want to be strong and are willing to push themselves and put in the work alongside me is what I'm looking for.
Yeah, I remember that when my first exposure to powerlifter, I was in powerlifting as I was invited to go watch the APF state meet in like 2004-ish. And what got me was watching how people approach their lifts. Like when they came on the platform, that you could see what, the wheels turning in their heads about, getting into the right position and having the right mindset to get through a lift, and just the struggle and the strain and all that stuff. And it didn't matter how much they were lifting. It was what their approach was. And I think that what you're talking about, people being nervous about training with you because they're not as strong, is the same kind of notion that keeps people from doing their first meet, because they feel like, oh, I need to be strong enough to do whatever. And it's like, no, you don't, not really. What you need to do is have honest effort. And that if you have honest effort, that reflects in your face. It reflects in how you prepare yourself. It reflects in how you approach the meet itself, like your demeanor, all of that. That's so much more important than the weights. Like, I mean, winning a meet, like winning your weight class in a meet, usually means you get a little freaking plastic medallion, or you get a little trophy or whatever, and you get a little bit of bragging rights for a minute. But none of that really matters. What matters is that you prepared yourself for a competition, and you attempted to perform your best. That's what matters. And I think that's probably going to be the same thing if you're able to put together a crew. It's people showing up, being consistent, and putting in their best effort.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to highlight for the audience, and again, sometimes when you throw out numbers, it's like good or bad because some people can relate. Some people even think like, because for a lot of people, even like a 3-plate or 4-plate squat is tremendous, and it absolutely is for the average person. So like when Larry was kind of getting started, and I would say he was probably around like a 1900 total, which is still like that's a person's dream. Still, that's a amazing. 900 kilos, 850. That's a huge total. But anyways, our kind of typical squat crew. I was one of the few people still in powerlifting gear. I was cheating to keep up with all the young bucks and everything, and that's still true to this day.
Sounds familiar.
But I was kind of in like the 800 to 850 range at the time. I would say when Larry came on, because I did my first 800-pound squat. I did 850 in 2013 was the first time I squatted 800 plus pounds. We had Dominici, and Dominici was a great training partner. He ended up squatting 900 pounds in just knee sleeves, which is still like still extremely rare feat. I don't know if you remember or if we talked about Michael Song's list, but Dominici was the first guy that actually, and I don't even know if they still have the curated list anymore, but Dominici was the first guy to make the 2,000-pound Raw Hall of Fame. He did that, and squatting was his best lift. He was an 800-plus squatter. Then we had Mark Greenstein, who was our best lightweight guy. He did a 1,900-pound at 220, and then he did an 1825, and he ended up being like a 700-pound squatter. And then we had one of my training partners, Eric Prush, and he was my first coach, and he has his own business now. And he was more of like a deadlift guy, but he was like a 500-pound squatter. So we had people like from the 500-pound range to 800-pound range, all in the same monolith. So like we took plates off, wasn't a big deal. Like, and everyone was great. But by the time when I got to deadlift day, Eric Prush, he was like the low man on the totem pole for squats, but then he would kick my ass because he was like a 700-plus deadlifter. So we all kind of took our licks sometimes. We all had strengths and weaknesses, and then you have people like Larry, who's just good at every lift, and he figures, so that's always like annoying. But it's good to like kind of push, and then you kind of have your day. You'll have a lift that you kind of excel with. And it was kind of fun. So like on squat day, like, I would be the one, the last man standing most of the time. And I would, throw the knee wraps on, the canvas suit, and do what I can to kind of, do a little bit more than the next guy. Because, eventually, like I said, Dom ended up kind of tying my best squat in just knee sleeves, which, before he was done, which is incredible. And then, we had some people like, and I know like Larry could speak to this too. I know that Larry got a lot more confidence in me as a coach because Dom and Mark those were all homegrown guys. We grew up in Plain Edge, New York, all from the same town in North Massapequa. We all played football together and wrestled. And so it's kind of like, again, I don't want to compare myself to Louis, but kind of similar where a lot of Louis's first elite lifters, they were just hometown guys from Columbus. And I was trying to create something similar on on a lower scale in Long Island, but a lot of our guys were homegrown, and even Larry basically was homegrown too. He just came in from the Bronx, but so I don't know if you can kind of talk to like the difference in like the training partners, and then if you guys, and also maybe at some point we could talk about the importance of the training, your long-term training partner, Black Tom Cruise. But what was it like having those different levels of ability levels? And some people maybe were good at knee wrapping, some people were good at other things. What are some things that you would like remember from those times, like those early days?
Sure. So Black Tom Cruise was my longest standing workout partner, and many, myself included, will agree he's the greatest hype man of all time. And that's something that I'm not sure gets talked about often in the community, is about like having a great hype man, and not necessarily just a great workout partner, but somebody that makes the training more fun. Like he just brought so much energy and charisma to every session that I took so much more pleasure just showing up, because a lot of the time I knew Black Tom Cruise was going to be there, and his banter was just second to none, and he made lifting like the best social event I could think of. Like why bother doing anything else when I have people like Black Tom Cruise around every workout session, every training session, not just to lift with, but also to laugh with, and that's what I found Black Tom Cruise was the greatest at. He had a great sense of humor. And even when I was getting down on myself or whatever, so having someone like that just always keep your spirits high. He was the most positive person I ever met, right? I never, like, even when his dad passed away, like, this guy never had a negative thing to say about himself or about, it's just like he was so positive, and that was so valuable to me because he always kept me uplifted. And that's what, ideally in a perfect world, I'm looking for in, my community that I'm trying to build at One Gen. Not just people that are serious, hardcore powerlifters, but also know how to have a good time with it too, and keep spirits high and be positive.
Yeah, that can be hard to maintain. I mean, it's great that you have that. It can be hard to maintain when you have a bunch of strong personalities. I can just tell you from my perspective that back in the old SC days, it was sometimes touch and go. Honestly, there were egos. There were a lot of there's little dust ups sometimes in the gym, and it's like I used to always think about, like, I mean, and partly because I was recording a lot of training sessions, but I always used to think of them like as episodes. It's like, this is an episode of a reality show, and that's really sort of, I mean, it's almost became a reality show a couple of times, where people just rubbed each other the wrong way. And in competition, in moments of competition, people always rooted for their teammates. And sometimes in training, there could be friction for sure, and I don't know. Some people can handle that and just sort of let the water off a duck's back and not care about it, and other people like hold on to it for a long time. So anyway, I'm just saying it can be hard to develop that when you have a bunch of strong personalities, and it sounds like you guys were able to avoid that.
Well, I will say, I'd say like when I was at the time, I was still a special education teacher, and a lot of us would train basically after 7 o'clock. We always joked, you don't know what goes on after seven. So all like the women and the children and the kids, the athletes, doors would close, lock, like only if you weren't part of the powerlifting team. So it definitely was a similar kind of vibe. And over the years, the culture at Gaglione Strength has shifted. When I spent a little bit more time in 2017, I spent a week long. I call it my West Side pilgrimage. It's maybe being a little bit over dramatic, but I spent a week with Louis. I trained with like Anthony Oliveira, Jason Coker. Trying to think who else was there. I kind of I call it like an observational internship, but basically I would just I observed with Louis. I kind of learned under Louis. We went to the Bob Evans. We went to breakfast and all those things. So at that time there was some people, there was some falling out. Some of the people I mentioned, like there was times where like we weren't speaking. There was times where like people were kicked out of the gym. There was time, and I'm sure the same thing with you, Jim. Like there was some tumultuous times. And I think when you have people that really care, they're really passionate, emotions run high, and then there's, calling a spade, there's performance enhancing drugs involved and all these things. And that can just like elevate if someone has a big personality, it can even be a bigger personality when performance enhancing drugs are involved. Over time, after that kind of 2017, I started to think about like what are the best elements of Westside that I could take back to Gaglione Strength, and then try to like kind of cut out like maybe some of the other stuff. Maybe can we have a competitive, fun environment that's less cutthroat? Can we still be supportive and competitive? Can we, be hard on each other, but like not, but in like a constructive way? So those are, and I'm still kind of working on this, and this is something that I kind of make a point, and every now and then that old flip will switch especially if I'm getting ready for a meet or whatever. I'm like, okay, like you need to chill out. Like this is not that serious. This is like a hobby. You know what I mean? So I think over time, and that's where someone like Black Tom Cruise, I think was great because he just never had a negative like thing to say about anyone. It's just, that was his personality. So he always kind of brought a lot of warmth. And he kind of would cut through, and I don't think anyone ever had a problem with him. He was just one of those guys that was just always cheerful, and so I think having those people that are like, whether the peacekeepers or the people that are always fun, I think that really helped. And I know for me personally, that's something I had to kind of take a look at in the mirror as I got older. And after that 2017, I was like, okay, like let me try to take the best elements of Westside and then try to make it a more family friendly environment. But still have all the programming, the team culture, because I think the idea of a crew is so important. But yeah, I think that you can like anything else. I was a super heavyweight. You can like take all this stuff too far. So trying to kind of find that middle ground where you kind of get the best of both worlds. So that's something where it's easier said than done. But I think sometimes you have to like let the pendulum swing all the way to the end to kind of find that center point. And like we definitely took things too far. And especially, when you start breaking records and stuff, you get a little bit cocky, and sometimes some of the people, have a little bit of a God complex, if you will. I think it's just you start to feel like you're invincible until you kind of get shot down a little bit, until you get humbled. So, I don't know if that kind of resonates with you at all, but that's just kind of how I looked about these things, and that's why I've kind of definitely kind of calmed down a lot, if you will. And my wife may disagree, but I've definitely slowed down a bit. I've definitely gotten less aggressive in training. That's why I kind of, and even like now, like I'm like, semi-retired, doing more strict curl and stuff. But even like me at like 80%, it's still a lot for like the average person. Where when we were like running at 100%, it's like, and maybe we shouldn't be running at 100. Maybe we need to like kind of chill out. Like Larry said, I think that the more you can restrain yourself, because most people can't tap into their self like that.
Yeah.
Most people can't like recruit. You know what I mean? Like when you're like doing like a 900-pound squat or a big bench, a big deadlift, most people just don't have like that, that switch they can flip. And I think it's good to like be able to learn how to like turn that on in a competitive situation. But it's one of those things. Dave Tate used to call it like his zippy cards, and he would only have like one or two like every so often. So you kind of use those wisely, because if you use them too much, you break down. It could be detrimental to your nervous system, your mood, and everything else. You have to kind of restrain yourself until it's time. And that's like one thing I think Larry did a great job with as his competition career kind of took off. He learned to trust the process. But then on meet day, like the leash was off, and we were there to do the job. So all the training up into that point, and most of his training, we would touch 90%, sometimes 95%, but like the really heavy stuff was done with a reverse band. The really heavy stuff was done with chains. If it was straight weight and all that stuff, it really was usually not as crazy. But then on game day, on meet day, then we hit the numbers that we needed to. And luckily, like I said, I have a pretty good batting average with picking attempts, and we were more fortunate in making more than we missed. But I think part of that is just having, like I said, like almost like, basically a decade relationship of knowing each other. And then you can really kind of make those decisions on the fly when the pressure is on.
You were talking about, people being able to sort of access that extra gear. And a lot of people seem to rely on, ammonia or a particular like hype song or whatever, particularly in meets, but sometimes a lot in training sessions too. And that I'm always kind of surprised by that. Those are things that never like really synced up for me. Like I either had it or I didn't. They didn't necessarily help me one way or the other. What do you guys think about those sort of things? Larry was talking about how being hyped up by someone, but hyped up by those external factors like, smelling salts and whatever music you wanted to listen to.
I'm great you brought that.
Larry, you want to answer that one first? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up. That gets, I get that question often. And basically, when I have a hype song, or at least in the past when I did, every time you listen to it, it hits less and less hard, right? So you build a tolerance to it, and then you become dependent on it. And then if it doesn't work, it's like, damn, well, now I can't turn that switch on, right? Or I would try and go to a dark place, or I would have someone slap me to get me fired up. And that's fun for a time, right? But it doesn't always work, right? But what does always work, what you can depend on, is yourself, internal motivation. And I learned to, when it's game day, when it's time for a big lift, 90% or above, just execute, right? Control my breathing, have a little bit of caffeine, don't go too crazy, nothing too extreme, and just focus on executing the lift properly. Like, what are my technique cues? Because that's the most important thing. When I start like blacking out and going to that dark place, or the hype song, or the slapping, it could get you a little bit too aggressive, and you get sloppy, and your form breaks down. Then you get injured, you miss a lift, you don't squat deep enough, and so on. So I tell people, just focus on proper execution. And I remember so many times John sitting in front of me like, listen, stop thinking, just execute. And that's as simple as it is, right?
Well, that brings up another question. A lot of our lifters right now in the gym are working with a coach. Sometimes it's somebody who is also a member of the gym. Often they're working with a remote coach. Very small number of people are probably working more from a template and less from whatever. I mean, but we have iPhone tripods all over the place because people are filming lifts for for their coaches and for Instagram and stuff too. But they're not posting every single lift that they record because those are all going to their coaches. What are your thoughts on both sides about like what effective coaching looks like? Whoever wants to go first.
Larry, what do you think has been the biggest factors in your success in terms of like our relationship and our dynamic? Because I think you maybe kind of riff off like trusting in the process and just maybe some things that maybe I unload some. I kind of take on some bandwidth that you can kind of just focus on being an athlete. Maybe if that as like a starting point.
Yeah, so what's so great about having a good coach is it takes away all of the overthinking, right? When people try and coach themselves, you tend to second guess yourself and start to change things around and you start to lose faith in the process. You start to doubt yourself. But when you just put your faith in a coach, you just show up and execute, right? It takes away all the guesswork. And then on top of that, having good, consistent communication, the more you can communicate with your coach, the better. I've worked with people briefly in the past where communication is nearly non-existent. And as a result, I feel the training, nutrition, the recovery, everything gets compromised because they don't know what's going on. Maybe they're not reaching out, they're not as attentive. And I think communication is extremely important and what separates the good coaches from the ones that are not so good.
And on game day specifically, like, because I know like I'm wearing like the world record shirt, for a reason. So like every single time that you broke a world record, there was different federation, different circumstance, maybe different states even. But the common denominator is that we were linked up. And I was like your game day coach, right? And I think that's something that I think is really overlooked in powerlifting is even in raw lifting, because in equipped lifting and raw with wraps and stuff, like actually having someone to wrap your knees and put you in the suit and all these things. But what were some things like on game days specifically in terms of like the attempt selection, the warm-ups, finding like electrolytes for when you're cramping? I know we have a funny story about that, but what are some things like on game day that you found like really helpful to like really allow you to be successful on the platform?
I mean, you touched on a couple of really good ones, such as attempt selection. And that's something that is so stressful. And I couldn't imagine going to a meet and having to choose my own attempts because how could I possibly pick the right number? Whereas I felt whenever John picked my attempts, it felt just right. Openers, second, thirds, everything felt just as it should, right? And then just when you experience that meet after meet, you start to eliminate a lot of the anxiety that's supposed to be there on game day because like, okay, well, I'm with a coach that always picks the right attempt, right? So if I don't get it, it's on me, right? Because he knows what he's doing. He knows my body. And if I've been following the program, my nutrition recovery's on point, right? I should get this lift, right? So I usually like to put that on myself. And if I don't get an attempt, I always put it on myself, never on the coach, never on John. That aside, from significant things like if I did a weight cut, which I hated to do, I don't do anymore. And I remember one time, I don't remember exactly which competition, I was cramping so bad, I couldn't even open my hands. So I was like, how am I going to finish the meet? Literally, I couldn't open my hands. They were just glued shut. Never had it happen before in my life. But with John's support, I was able to get electrolytes and he was like, listen, drink like a gallon of this. I don't remember exactly what we did, but it worked, right? That's the most important thing. Just having someone there that really is attentive, right? I have to keep emphasizing attentive, like that's really paying attention and really cares about your performance is priceless. And I've watched other people try and coach their clients and it's not unfortunately, many people don't get the same TLC that I got when John was coaching me, right? Like just that, attention to the little details and most importantly, keeping me out of my head, right? Because on game day, it's like, okay, maybe I skip this lift on this day or I didn't eat enough on that day and I start overthinking everything and anxiety gets a little bit too overbearing. It doesn't happen too often, but if it ever did, that's when John steps in, like, stop thinking, here's the plan, this is what we're going to do, right? And just that kind of keeps me out of my head because the second you start overthinking things on game day, I feel like then you start thinking, well, maybe I'm not ready for this today. Right. And then you start going that rabbit hole like, well, because I don't believe in myself anymore, how am I going to get this lift? Right. So it's like having that coach like John there to tell you, listen, you're ready for this. This is what we're going to do. And just adjust the plan as the day goes on because things change. Like maybe the open didn't go as fast as we thought it would or whatever. Like it's so easy to get in your head and overthink things. And that's where John steps in and is like, listen, this is our second attempt. Don't even have to go back and forth on him about it. I never argue with John. I just stuck to the plan, and more times often than not, it worked out.
So there's two things I want to highlight with especially I think game day nutrition is often like really and game day nutrition starts with like the night before. So I think a lot of people, Stan's kind of famous with this is like, you eat clean all like prep or whatever, and then you go right to IHOP was very like IHOP, Bob Evans, eat pizza, pasta, pancakes, and then like your stomach's upset, your weight's like all messed up, you're in the bathroom more than you
Yeah.
know then you're not able to keep the weight on. So being like more dialed in like the day before, and then have like the treats and stuff like after the meet is over. And I know with Larry specifically, and I always have electrolytes on hand. I always have different like things for, and sometimes like you might just say like, hey, I'm not really sure if this is if you're a newer coach, like I'm not sure if this is going to work, but just being confident and be like, hey, I think you need electrolytes, and just like being confident in your delivery, to your athlete, I think is important. Even if you're like, I don't know how this is going to go, like, just trying to like keep the athlete, because if you're showing nervousness, if you're not confident, that's going to kind of go into like the athlete. So we kind of talked about, Black Tom Cruise. If you're giving out positive, confident energy, that's going to kind of rub off like on the athlete. And I think that's really important, that you're very confident in your attempt selection. You've kind of had good communication leading up to the meet. So that way there's no, oh, I think I'm opening too heavy or I'm opening too light. Like those things should not like be happening. Like those conversations should be had prior to the meet, not on game day. That should not be a discussion. So one particular instance, so like when we started competing a little bit more with like the USPA, and when the US Open was kind of a thing, I was just talking actually with Greeno, and I think we have mutual friend, JP Price. That like warm up room was crazy. You had like Brandon Allen and JP Price and
Mhm.
it was like a crazy meet. And then we had, of course, Yuri Belkin was whipping it. He was like the John Hack of like the time, but the squat depth was like, the strike zone was tough that day. The bench pauses was tough that day. So we had to like lower our expectations, and that was not. I didn't tell Larry about like, hey, like the judges are really like it. That was not like that was my like problem to fix. So we like lowered our third attempts considerably, and then this was a really cool moment for me as a coach, because we had a very unique opportunity, because Larry got to go head to head against Dennis Cornelius, who's one of the greatest heavyweights in IPF history. And so we knew we needed to pull a big deadlift to win. Larry was the lighter lifter, because of course he had to make my job a little bit harder, because he was trying to break a world record in knee sleeves, and everyone else was in knee wraps. But he's like, I want to break Eric Lillibridge's record in knee sleeves and also like do the Smeed. I'm like, sure, no problem, it'll be fine. You're just bringing a knife to a gunfight, but it's Larry Wheels, so we'll figure it out. So anyway, so Larry basically had like a 100-pound handicap on his total. So that was the start of the meet. And now like everyone's bombing out on squats. The pauses on benches are crazy. So we get into deadlifts, and then we're doing a little bit of jockeying for attempt selection. And I'm like, okay, like Larry did had some good pulls in training. It's a tough meet. The judging is tough. Kind of see, Dennis is not a great deadlifter, so I think he ended up. We see what he does on his third attempt. I don't remember if he got it or not. Okay, if Larry pulls 400 kilos, they'll tie, and then Larry will win on body weight. So we put the attempt in, and Larry just crushes it. And it's like an iconic video. Like he's in the MHP singlet, and like he's going crazy, and he's like big celebration. So he beats Dennis Cornelius head to head, and it puts him third place overall. So the podium was Brandon Allen ended up taking second, and then Yuri Belkin, we knew was basically it was his like meet to lose. So Brandon Allen had a great day, and then Larry kind of rounded out the podium, and it was a very tough field. So to podium and like not even be wearing knee wraps at a wrap meet was pretty crazy, and the fact that he had like a very unique opportunity to go head to head with one of the best IPF lifters in history. I believe he still has the IPF world record in the 120 weight class. So anyways, that was a really cool memory. And I was like, and again, not to toot my own horn, but like stuff like that would not happen without a good game day coach. Like those things, like if you just say like, hey, because Larry was capable of like an 850 squat, but we ended up with like 826 or something, whatever the kilo number is. It's like we had to like really drop it down quite a bit. Same thing. I thought he was capable of like a 635 bench. I think he did like 606 or 611. So you have to kind of lower expectations. You got to adjust to the strike zone. And I think that's something where it doesn't matter like what you did in training. Like it's like, okay, what are the conditions of the day? And that's where like the sport side really comes in. So those are always the most fun for me. It gets me fired up just thinking about it. Like those were, some of the good old days for sure.
As a lifter, I sometimes enjoyed just having somebody else put in my numbers and just not even tell me what they were in a meet. Like I was, and I sort of block it out when it was announced or whatever. That was sometimes helpful, because then you get the numbers in your head and you get like you think you have hard stops and you don't. Like I would never have squatted 650 if somebody had told me I was going to squat 650 in this meet, because it was like 60 pounds more than I'd ever squatted anywhere ever. So that makes a difference. Another thing that I think really helps is with a coach on game day is timing warm-ups. There's a lot of attention that needs to go into that. When the next flight is coming up and what equipment is available to you, to warm up in a warm-up room, because not every warm-up room is created the same by any stretch of the imagination. Sometimes you're warming up with pound plates, but you're going to lift with kilos. That's often the case. We actually have enough kilo sets in the gym that we're able to let people warm up with kilos if that's what they desire. But yeah, and just so much of that can really get in your head and make you anxious is taken away if somebody else is managing it for you. Makes a big difference. So I know that John and I talked last time about strict curl, and I know you guys have a meet coming up in Southern California in January that you want to continue to inform people about. So just lay that out for everybody.
Yeah. So, but it's kind of crazy, even just since we last spoke, which hasn't been too long at this point, but this is going to be one of the most highly anticipated heavyweight matchups. We have a couple of really heavy hitters coming, and I'm hoping that one of my New York guys, he's kind of like not 100% confirmed, but if he does go, so we have my guy is John Archibald, Panamanian Hulk. So he's got the RPS world record right now. So he's like the reigning king with 210 pounds, so about 95 kilos. And then we have Big Joe Sabol. I want to say that he's recently lost a lot of weight. He's still a super heavyweight or a 308 lifter, but he was like a 400-pound dude at one point, and he was up there around like really big guy. Now he's in like the low 300s. I think he's still like super heavyweight, but like maybe like 315. So he's lost a lot of weight. So sometimes in strict curl, that's when you have the smaller belly, you can kind of keep it closer to your body, and that can like help. So he's kind of in that 215 range right now, but he's done like a 220 plus, like he's a 100-kilo curl guy, which is again very rare air. That's like, probably less than 10 people I'd say in America has ever done that. And then you have Antonio Collins, and I know he's actually a big fan of Larry. We've talked about, he's really excited to meet you. He's also a 220-pound curler as well. And then we have Brendan Todd. Brendan Todd's actually I consider him like a hybrid strength athlete, because he does like powerlifting, he does strongman, he does street. I don't know if you're familiar, Jim, with street lifting, which is like weighted calisthenics, dips and pull-ups.
No, I'm not.
He's like a 275-pound. He's a nice kid. He kind of lives close to me, so he did a second strict curl meet with us. He has got the 100% raw world record with 226 pounds. I think it's 102.5 kilos. So it's going to be like the most stacked heavyweight lineup we've ever seen in a strict curl meet. So it's going to be like fun to watch, because all those guys are going to be going head to head, and like one miss, like someone else can kind of jump the other. So right now, John Archibald is like the RPS, record holder, but we have 3 other heavy hitters. So we got 4 guys that are doing 95 kilos or more, which I don't think has ever been to my knowledge. And certainly not, I think, on the West Coast. There might have been some meets like in the Arnold and stuff, but and then we have some good lightweight battles. Like we have two guys, Gary Teeter and Ed Joseph, that are in the 132 weight class, and they've both gone over 132. So I think 2 pounds separate their PR. So that's very exciting. 2 pounds is not a lot, so that's going to be exciting. And then we're just trying to get some more ladies involved. So really exciting stuff. And then the other thing that we're going to do, I'm not sure what we're going to call it. I'm calling it Training Wheels Camp But we want to do some open tryouts for Larry's crew at One Gen. Like Jim said, it's not anything. So after the strict curl meet, we're just gonna have like an open lift, and I'm really excited for that as well because some of the best training partners, like again, Jim, you were training with 1,000. I think maybe Cartwright was like 1,100. Like you guys had some like 1,000-pound plus lifters, 6, 7, 800-pound benchers. Just because the weights can come off, it's not just about the amount of weight you can lift. And also when it comes to spotting and loading and stuff like that, as long as you have good communication and you're coordinated, you can you could spot 1,000-pound squat. It is scary, but if you guys are coordinated, and that's the whole thing, like together we can achieve more if you guys learn to work together. And I know that, and I know we'll let Larry speak a little bit as well with whatever if he wants to tease you guys a little bit more, or if he wants to unveil some big news on the 50% Facts podcast. But I know he recently put a post out that he's getting the itch. He's getting the itch again. So I don't know if you want to say anything to that, Larry, or just leave the audience in suspense. But anything else that you want to say about the team tryouts? What kind of people you're looking for? What are you looking for in a good training partner?
Right. So we touched on this a little bit earlier in the pod, but I'll get a little deeper into it. So really what I'm looking for is people that just want to be the best version of themselves, don't take training too seriously, know how to have a good lab, make it fun, right? Because for me, training is pleasure, right? I don't want this to feel like a chore, like this is work. I genuinely look forward to going to train, and I'm not just fixated on the result anymore, on hitting PRs or breaking world records or game day. I'm really looking forward to just, having people that are reliable, that are going to show up when I expect them to, because I'm a very punctual person. And if I say I'm going to be there at X o'clock, I'm going to be there at X o'clock at that time, right? So just respect my time, respect the gym, and you have fun with it. Now, as we mentioned earlier, it's not important to me how much you lift, as long as you are interested in pushing yourself and you want to compete, because I think that's also important that you enjoy getting on stage and you enjoy the process, because ideally I'd like to compete with my training partners. I competed many times with Black Tom Cruise, and what made it so magical, besides everything else I mentioned with all of his good qualities, was that we were training together for the same goal. We were preparing for the same competition, not to beat each other, right? It was never about that. It was just about like, okay, our goals align, right? Let's work together on this goal. And I can't do a heavy squat or bench anymore, like by myself, 90% plus. It's just not going to happen. I need at least 3 people, right? Middle and 2 side spotters.
Let's say five. Five is a crew. We're looking for 5.
Okay, we can get 5. I'd be jumping. That'd be great.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Jim.
I just, we were talking about spotting training partners and spotting people in meets, but particularly training partners. Like I was never close to being the strongest, but boy, I really took the spotting part of it very seriously, because like you're not lifting the weight, but you're protecting the lifter. And that's a big responsibility. That's something that you need to keep in your head, and you need to try to be as good a spotter as you are a lifter. And that is hard for some folks, but I always felt like I could side spot a heavy bench, even if I couldn't, even if it was just like 2 of us on one side or just one or whatever, I could do it because I didn't want anything to go badly for whoever was lifting, however I was feeling about them at the moment. And I think that just has to be part of it. You have to understand that when you're spotting, it's not about you. You're committed to the safety of your teammate who's lifting.
Yeah, there's 2 quick things I wanted to say. So I know, like with Larry's when he broke Stan's record, the 2275, Otis and Black Tom Cruise, they trained this. They did the same meet together, and I think that like kind of added to just the environment that they were in. And I think Otis was very close to. I'm going off memory here, so someone could fact check me. I think that Otis might have pulled like 770 or something, like in the mid to high 7s. So, and then he was up there, and then he had a really good day. And then I remember Larry broke the total record on his second attempt, and then one of my buddies, Chris Delafave, he's a really good multiply deadlifter. He's got some records in equipped lifting, and I remember Larry outlifted him in the deadlift raw, which was cool. So I kind of gave him the business a little bit, that our raw guy had the biggest pull of the day, because Chris has done like a 900-pound deadlift in competition. Like, he's very accomplished, and we have good banter. But it was a really cool day. So you had people like Chris Delafave, really big gear lifter. I want to say he totaled like 2,600. Larry totaled 2,275. It was some really good lifting that day. It was actually done at Hofstra University. If people are familiar with Long Island. And then the other thing I wanted to kind of say, like, to your point about the safety. So there was like a video that went viral, which I know I kind of joke tongue in cheek, but Larry's cameraman was really happy that they caught this on camera. But I was benching in a shirt, and I was doing a new bench shirt at the time, and it was like 550. It wasn't crazy, but it's still 550, and it kind of got out of it fell back towards my face. And then we had like Jesse James West on like the side, who he was not competent in spotting, didn't know what was going on. He's just like deer in the headlights. Larry grabs it with like one hand and like, saves my life, but it was like very close to my face and throat. And it's one of those things where like, if you're not like attentive and kind of go over those things. So it's pretty scary stuff. So yeah, it's really important that you have like the lifter's best interest in mind, and take your headphones out, pay attention to the bar. Don't fixate on what the weight is. Just be in position before it happens. And like I said, that's really crucial. So that in terms of like a good training partner is going to offer support and safety first and foremost, and then everything else is gravy. I think that's kind of, you're consistent, you're putting in good energy to the session. And that's kind of what we're looking to foster. And especially, I know, as Larry builds up the powerlifting culture in One Gen, that's something we try to foster at Gaglione Strength. Like I said, it's going to be our 15-year anniversary as a company. And I think one of the reasons that we're still standing as a brick and mortar business in these hard times is because we have a good community, and we always kind of foster that team environment. That's what we want to have at One Gen on the West Coast as well.
That's great. Yeah, I think the one of the worst spotting fails I've ever seen was the one that's actually in Power Unlimited.
Oof.
Yeah, everybody from a certain period of time knows that one. Yeah, and the issue was that he had a buddy handing off who was a bodybuilder, not a powerlifter. And so when he handed the weight off, and the center guy steps away, because that most federations require the center liftoff guy to get out of the way. He also backed off, and so when the weight started heading down, there was nobody to catch it but his face. So it was, pretty mortifying. Anyway, since I know that it's getting late in Russia, and I appreciate your time for sure. Where can people find you, Larry, and where can they find information about signing up for this meet?
Sure, and thank you for having me. And you can find me on all socials under the same handle, Larry Wheels. And it's all over my page, all over John Gaglione's page if you want information for the strict curl coming up in a few weeks. I hope to see you there. Actually, I know I'm going to get motivated to compete myself when I'm in that environment. Oh, my
Breaking
goodness.
news, guys. Breaking news. You heard it here first on 50% Facts.
Exactly. I mean, how can you not? You are your environment. You guys are going to get me fired up, but I hope to see you there. And again, Jim, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being on.
Yeah, so you can follow me at Gaglione Strength on all the socials, and you definitely follow RPS Powerlifting. Yeah, feel free to shoot us a message, guys. If you guys want to, I don't know how many spots we'll have, but if you are seriously interested, serious inquiries only. Again, doesn't matter what your total is. You guys can shoot me a DM at Gaglione Strength, and we'll start to kind of put the feelers out. Also, make sure you're following One Gen Gym, and also, I believe head trainer, if I'm speaking out of turn, Damian Bentley is going to be helping with this process as well. He's a good friend, competitive bodybuilder. I'm not sure if he just got his pro card or not, but he's very high level as well. Great culture at One Gen. So again, we're just trying to kind of foster that to them. Again, I really can't thank Jim enough and 50% Facts for just having this platform, because again, at the end of the day, a lot of the stuff that Jim has curated over the years kind of really helped us kind of get our message out there. Appreciate, like I said, over, years and years later, we're still kind of doing our thing and involved in this crazy strength community.
Well, you're welcome. I appreciate the kind words there. Yeah, I have to say that, like, the era of social handles, it took me a while to actually for it to dawn on me that you had a real last name, Larry. Part of me was just like, Wheels. And I will freely admit that back in the day when we had Juji Mufu on, I just thought that was his name. I thought it was just like Cher, just like one word, that's it. Eventually I learned that he had a real name. So anyway, people who are interested in having the potential chance to train with Larry, and they're serious about it, I think that you should jump in there and find out. And my caveat that you guys aren't saying is, like, just like check your ego at the door about it, and be willing to give. If you give, you'll get. That's really the the bottom line of it, is that it's a mutually beneficial situation. Anyway, this show is 50% facts, where percent is a word and 50 is just numbers. 50% facts is a Spreaker podcast in association with iHeartMedia on the Obscure Celebrity Network. And I will talk to you next time. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you.